The mud-covered stranger. The sun was setting behind the hills. The sky turned orange and gold as Jacob walked through the forest. He lived alone near the edge of the old science zone, where no one visited anymore. People said strange things happened there, but Jacob didn't care. He liked quiet places. He was carrying firewood when he heard something. It was a soft sound, like someone crying or coughing. Jacob stopped. The sound came again, this time a little louder. He dropped the firewood and followed the noise. His boots crushed dry leaves as he moved through the trees. Birds flew away. The forest became silent. Then he saw her. At the edge of a small stream, lying on the wet ground, was a woman. She was not human. Her body was covered in thick brown mud. Her hair was full of leaves. Her arms were thin, shaking. She had no clothes. Her skin, where it was not hidden by mud, had a strange shimmer, almost glowing softly like moonlight. She looked weak, like she hadn't eaten in days. Jacob's eyes widened. She wasn't just dirty, she was hurt. There were bruises on her arms, scratches, and deep red lines like she had been tied or beaten. But the most painful thing was her eyes, big, scared, and full of sorrow. She looked up at him. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Then she closed her eyes and passed out. Jacob stood still. He didn't know what to do. Should he leave her? She was not from Earth. She could be dangerous, or maybe she was part of something bigger. An alien war, a trap, a test. But something inside him didn't let him walk away. She was cold. She was dying. And she was alone. Jacob quickly took off his coat and wrapped it around her body. Her skin was cold as ice. He picked her up carefully. She was light, too light, like her body had been starving for days. As he walked back to his house, the questions filled his head. Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she here? Naked, covered in mud and broken? Jacob lived in a small cabin built from scrap metal and old wood. It was warm and safe. He placed her on the soft blanket near the fireplace. He lit the fire quickly and boiled some water. Her breathing was shallow. He brought a towel and gently cleaned the mud from her face. Her skin was smooth and strange, pale silver with soft glowing lines that looked like tiny stars. She had a cut on her forehead. He cleaned it carefully. Suddenly, her hand grabbed his wrist. Jacob froze. Her eyes opened wide. She looked at him, scared and confused. It's okay, Jacob said softly. You're safe now. She looked around the room. Her body was tense, ready to run, but she was too weak. Jacob brought warm water in a cup and held it near her lips. She didn't trust him at first, but after a moment, she drank. Her hands were shaking. She said nothing, only stared. Jacob sat beside the fire, watching her from a distance. He had seen many things in his life. Old wars, broken machines, even other species on the news. But never had he seen someone so lost. He gave her an old blanket. She pulled it around herself tightly. Still silent, still afraid. She was not like the aliens on the screens. She was young, fragile, not a soldier, not a monster. Just broken. The night grew darker. The fire crackled softly. Jacob stayed nearby, alert but calm. The woman slowly lay down on the blanket and closed her eyes again. Before falling asleep, she whispered something in a weak voice. Jacob didn't understand the words, but he heard one thing clearly: help. That was the moment he knew. He couldn't walk away now. Whoever she was, whatever had happened, she needed someone, and he had chosen. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof of the cabin. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow across the room. The alien woman lay still on the floor, wrapped in an old blanket. Her breathing was slow and shallow, but steady. Jacob hadn't slept all night. He sat in the wooden chair by the fire, his rifle leaning against the wall. Every sound outside made him tense. His mind kept racing. Who was she? Was someone looking for her? Was she dangerous? But when his eyes moved to her face, his doubts faded. She looked peaceful now. Almost human. As dawn broke, she stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling. Then her body stiffened. Panic returned. She sat up fast, pulling the blanket tighter. "It's okay," Jacob said, raising his hands. "No one's going to hurt you." She looked at him, blinking slowly. Her mouth opened, trying to form words, but all that came out was a quiet whisper in an alien tongue. Jacob pointed to himself. "Jacob." Then he pointed to her. She looked confused, then lowered her head. "No name?" Jacob asked softly. She was silent. Jacob walked to the kitchen and brought back a small plate with cooked eggs and bread. He placed it in front of her. She stared at the food like she didn't know what to do. He broke off a piece of bread and ate it, smiling. Then he pushed the plate toward her again. This time she took it. She ate slowly, as if expecting it to vanish. Each bite seemed to bring life back into her eyes. After finishing, she looked at Jacob with a strange expression, part fear, part wonder. Jacob smiled. "You're welcome." He wanted to ask more. Where did she come from? Why was she naked and alone? But he didn't push. She wasn't ready. Later that day, Jacob gave her a set of his old clothes, loose pants and a flannel shirt. She looked unsure at first, then took them into the bathroom to change. When she came out, the clothes hung off her small frame, but she looked warmer, more human. Still, she didn't speak, not a single word. But her eyes watched everything, curious and alert. She followed him from room to room, staying just close enough to not feel alone. When Jacob went outside to gather water, she followed him to the door but didn't step out. She was scared of the outside. Jacob looked at her and said gently, "You're safe here. No one's coming." That night she sat across the fire, holding a small wooden cup with both hands. She was shaking again. Her lips moved, whispering to herself in her own language. Then suddenly, she said one word, clear, in English. "Run." Jacob looked up. "Run?" She nodded slowly, her face pale, her hands trembling. Then she lifted her shirt slightly, revealing a strange mark on her side, a glowing symbol, like a tattoo made of light. Jacob leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What is that?" The mark pulsed, like a tracker. Jacob stood and pulled an old scanner from his shelf. He had used it once for machines and metal tools. He brought it close to the mark. It beeped. A warning popped up on the screen. "Classified subject detected. Bioslave tracking mark active." Jacob's heart pounded. She wasn't just lost. She had escaped. And someone, or something, was looking for her. Jacob looked at the woman. Her eyes were full of fear again. She covered the mark quickly, curling up on the floor like a child. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Jacob sat beside her, unsure what to say. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone now," he said. For a long moment there was silence. Then she whispered, "Lyria." Jacob blinked. "Lyria, that's your name?" She nodded. That night, as the fire burned low and the rain returned, Lyria finally slept without shaking, and Jacob, now fully awake, realized something. She wasn't just running from danger. She was running from something that considered her property, and they wouldn't stop until they got her back. Jacob sat at the kitchen table, holding the scanner in his hand. He stared at the warning message still glowing on the screen. "Bioslave tracking active. Subject class forbidden property. Do not assist." The words didn't make sense at first, but as he kept reading, it became clear. Lyria wasn't just some lost alien. She was labeled forbidden. Not even the slave markets on distant moons would take someone like her. Whoever owned her treated her like something worse than illegal, and she was right here, sleeping on his floor. Jacob looked at Lyria's sleeping form near the fireplace. Her face looked peaceful for now, but her body still twitched sometimes as if haunted by nightmares. He turned off the scanner and hid it under the floorboards. If someone found her here, if they knew she had survived the escape, what would they do to her? No. Jacob had already made his choice. He wouldn't give her back. The next morning, sunlight poured in through the windows. Lyria woke up slowly, stretching carefully as if her body still remembered pain. Jacob brought her water and a fresh piece of fruit. She accepted it with a small nod. A new habit. Quiet gratitude. But Jacob noticed something else. Her glowing mark was dimmer than yesterday. It pulsed slower. He pointed to it. Is it dying? Lyria looked down, then shook her head slowly. She placed her hand over the mark, closed her eyes, and began to hum, softly, in a strange, alien tune. The mark dimmed even more. Jacob's eyes widened. You can control it? She nodded. That was the first moment Jacob realized. Lyria wasn't just a victim. She was hiding something. Something important. Later that day, while Lyria rested, Jacob opened his old compad. He connected it to the DeepNet, using a stolen frequency he kept hidden for years. He typed a coded request into an ancient forum used by smugglers, hackers, and ex-soldiers. Need info on Class F bioslaves, especially ones with glowing body marks. Urgent. Minutes passed. Then a reply blinked on the screen. If she has a glowing mark, run. She's one of them. Jacob typed quickly. One of what? The reply came back. Weapon projects. Experimental control subjects. Not slaves, not citizens, not alive under galactic law. Just living tools. All were destroyed, except maybe one. Jacob felt cold all over. Was Lyria part of some experiment? That night he finally asked her directly. Lyria, what are you? She looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly, she unwrapped the bandage on her arm. Underneath, a strange design appeared, etched into her skin like wires made of light. Jacob stepped back. What is that? She spoke in broken English. They made me. Not born. Not normal. Used. Broken. Escape. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Again, they say I'm weapon, but I want to be person. Jacob knelt beside her. You are a person. No matter what they say. Lyria looked into his eyes, surprised, like no one had ever said that to her before. Suddenly, the scanner hidden under the floor lit up. Jacob pulled it out fast. A new warning flashed. Tracking signal activated, locator beacon pinged. Estimated arrival. 48 hours. Jacob's breath caught. They found you? Lyria stared at the scanner. Her lips trembled. No. I turn it off. I shut it down. Jacob looked at the mark on her side. It was glowing bright now, flashing red. Maybe they turned it back on, he said. From orbit. He stood quickly and went to the closet. Pulled out a heavy tool case. Lyria stood too, unsteady but determined. They come, she whispered. They kill, or take. Jacob looked at her and spoke the words slowly. Then we don't wait, she blinked. What? Do? Jacob gave her a jacket and handed her an old shock baton. We prepare. For the first time, she smiled. A small, scared smile, but a real one. Rain fell hard outside Jacob's cabin. The wind pushed against the wooden walls. Inside, the small space was quiet. Too quiet. Only the ticking sound of a broken clock filled the silence. Jacob sat across from Lyria, his hands covered in grease as he worked on a homemade signal blocker. He knew it was useless. Now, the tracker in her body had already sent a signal. The hunters were coming, but he had to try. Lyria sat curled up on the floor, a thick blanket over her shoulders. Her silver skin reflected the firelight. Her eyes were locked on the flames, but her mind was somewhere far away. Jacob looked up from the tools. You should eat something. Lyria didn't answer. He placed a hot mug in front of her. It's just broth. Easy to drink. Slowly, she reached for it, her fingers shaking. After a few sips, she whispered, I remember. Jacob leaned forward. Remember what? Her voice was soft, broken. Each word was like a shard of glass. Cold. Metal walls. Lights always on. No sky. No name. Just a number. She pointed to the glowing mark on her skin. Jacob listened, not interrupting. They gave pain. Then asked questions. I didn't know answers. They gave more pain. Her eyes filled with tears. Every day. Until I stopped crying. They said that was good. Said I was learning. Jacob felt something burn in his chest. Anger. Deep and quiet, but strong. I'm sorry, he said softly. They called me. Unit 9. She shivered. I was supposed to obey, kill if told, sleep in a box, eat paste, never speak, never feel. She looked at him, her voice a little louder now. Then one day something broke. The ship crashed, I ran. I hid. I fell from the sky. And then, you. She stared into his eyes. Why did you help me? Jacob didn't have the answer ready, but he gave the truth. Because no one deserves to be treated like a thing. That night the rain turned to snow. Jacob worked silently in the corner, building traps and gathering tools. Old farming drones were lined up near the back door, rewired and armed with improvised defenses. Lyria sat beside the fire, drawing strange symbols in a notebook. She was teaching herself English, one shaky word at a time. Jacob watched her from time to time. Every day she looked more alive, but there were still shadows in her eyes. Before sunrise, Lyria woke from a nightmare. She screamed. Jacob rushed. Over. She grabbed his arm. They will burn everything. They will take me. Jacob held her shoulders. Then we'll stop them. Together. Lyria gasped for air. Then she said something he never expected. I don't want to run anymore. He blinked. What do you mean? I want to fight. Jacob led her to the shed outside. The snow crunched under their boots. Inside, old weapons and gear from Earth's last militia war lay forgotten under dust. He pulled out a small energy blaster and placed it in her hands. She held it with practiced fingers. You've used this before, he said. Lyria nodded. They made me learn, but this time, it will be my choice. Later, as they sat by the fire again, Lyria looked at the window. Jacob, if I die, will you bury me under a tree? His face tightened. Don't talk like that. I want to rest somewhere quiet, somewhere with sky, not in a box. He looked at her and said gently, You're not dying. Not while I'm here. A long silence followed. Then, in the softest voice, Lyria said, They made me a weapon. But you treat me like a person. Jacob smiled. That's because you are one. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched his hand. It was the first time she had touched anyone by choice. The storm passed, the skies cleared, and above, in the cold darkness of space, something moved. A black ship, shaped like a knife, cut through the stars. Inside, a voice spoke through static. Tracker. Reactivated. Subject 9 located. Prepare for extraction. No survivors. The forest was silent. Too silent. Jacob stood on his porch at dawn, a shotgun slung over his shoulder and binoculars in hand. Frost covered the ground, glittering under the first light. Even the birds were gone. Behind him, Lyria slowly opened. The door. They're close, she whispered. Jacob nodded. Yeah, I can feel it. They had less than 24 hours after the warning from the scanner. That time had passed. Now, the game had changed. This wasn't about hiding anymore. It was war. Jacob and Lyria had turned the small cabin into a fortress. Every doorway was rigged with motion traps. The barn roof was armed with shock mines, and his farming drones now patrolled the perimeter, loaded with blades, sound emitters, and old-world tech Jacob had modified over the years. Lyria stood in the kitchen, suiting up in the armor Jacob had stitched together, scraps of soldier gear and metal plates. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was strong enough to protect her. Her glowing mark had faded again thanks to her meditation, but it wasn't gone. "They'll follow the scent," she said, adjusting the strap on her vest. "They don't stop until they have me." Jacob handed her a small radio. "They're not taking you, not alive, not dead, not ever." She stared at him, her silver eyes glowing faintly. "Why do you care so much?" Jacob paused. Then he said, "Because someone should." Around noon, the sky above the forest shimmered. Then it cracked open. Black silent ship appeared out of thin air, cloaked until now. Its long, sharp shape looked like a floating blade. Lights flickered underneath it, scanning the trees below. Jacob and Lyria watched from inside the cabin. They found the signal. "Trail," she whispered. From the underside of the ship, 3 dark figures dropped into the forest without sound. They didn't walk. They glided like shadows made of metal and bone. They carried long staffs that crackled with green energy. Jacob lifted his weapon. "What are those?" Lyria's voice turned hollow. "Hunters. Not alive, not dead. Machines, mixed with flesh. They feel no pain. They only follow orders." Jacob took a deep breath. "Then let's give them something they didn't expect." The first drone trap triggered within minutes. One hunter stepped on a pressure plate hidden under the snow. A burst of shrapnel launched into the air, tearing through its cloak. It didn't scream. It didn't bleed. But it stopped moving. Then the other 2 turned toward the cabin, fast. Jacob activated the defense system. Lights on the roof blinked red. Spinning blades dropped from trees. Drones attacked in swarms. But the hunters were faster. They moved like ghosts, dodging, spinning, striking. One sliced through 2 drones in a flash. Another launched a cable that wrapped around the fence and ripped it down. Inside the cabin, Lyria knelt on the floor, her hands on the glowing mark. She whispered words in her own language. "Jacob," she said, "I can slow them down." He looked at her. "How?" "I'm still connected to the system. They don't know that yet." "You mean, you can control them?" "No," she said, "but I can confuse them." She closed her eyes. Outside, the hunters suddenly paused. Their heads twitched. One stopped moving completely. "They're fighting. Back," she groaned. "But I have one. I can turn it against the others." Jacob ran outside with his rifle, shooting at the closest hunter. It deflected the bullets with its arm, but Jacob kept firing, drawing it closer. Suddenly, the third hunter, the one under Lyria's control, lunged forward and tackled the second. Metal cracked. Sparks flew. Jacob didn't waste the chance. He tossed a homemade EMP grenade. Boom. Both hunters froze, twitching. Jacob turned back toward the cabin. Just as the first hunter reappeared, wounded but still active, it threw its staff like a spear. Jacob barely ducked in time. The spear slammed into the porch wall, crackling with green lightning. "Jacob!" Lyria shouted from the door. "Get down!" She raised the blaster he had given her and fired, a clean shot, right into the hunter's head. The creature's body sparked, then fell still. The battle lasted only 10 minutes. But when it ended, the cabin yard was burning. Smoke rose from broken drones. The fence was torn apart. And in the snow lay 3 destroyed hunters, twisted machines, their eyes dark and lifeless. Jacob fell to his knees, breathing hard. Lyria walked to his side, her hands still shaking. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, but this was just a test." Jacob looked up. "A test? They sent 3 to see if I was really alive," she said. "Now they know." Jacob stared at the sky. The black ship was still floating above, silent and watching. "They'll come in full force next time," she whispered. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be ready." But even as he said it, he knew the next fight wouldn't be. This easy, because now, the real storm was coming. Night returned, but it brought no peace. The stars above the cabin were gone, swallowed by the shadow of the black ship. It no longer hovered silently. It had moved closer, louder. Engines hummed, like a growl from the heavens. The air vibrated. The animals in the woods had fled. Jacob and Lyria stood side by side, staring up at the sky. "It's preparing to land," Lyria said, her voice cold. Jacob loaded the last clip into his rifle. "Or preparing to burn everything down." Inside the cabin, everything was packed. Food, medicine, old batteries, and weapons. But they weren't running. Not this time. Earlier that day, after the fight with the hunters, Jacob had powered up a signal jammer he built years ago. It barely worked. Then and now it was running hot, shaking like it might explode. "Can this thing block their weapons?" Lyria asked. "Not their guns," Jacob said, "but maybe their minds. Those hunter things, they run on data. If I scramble their link to the ship, they can't coordinate." Lyria nodded slowly. "I can feed the signal." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the faintly glowing mark. "I still have part of their code. I can push static back through it." Jacob hesitated. "That's dangerous." "I don't care." He looked at her for a long moment. "All right, let's do it." Now, standing outside in the freezing night, Jacob's heart pounded. The ship above opened slowly, massive hatches sliding apart. Orange light spilled down, like fire from the sky. From inside, a dozen figures dropped in perfect formation, larger than the last hunters. "These aren't scouts," Lyria whispered. "These are elite units." They didn't walk, they marched. Their bodies looked more like machines now, taller, armored, sharper. No faces, just glowing visors and long plasma blades strapped to their backs. Lyria placed her hand on the jammer. "Now." Jacob flipped the switch. The machine whined, then screamed. Sparks flew. Smoke poured from its vents. Lyria screamed too, but not in pain. Her eyes glowed silver, her body shaking violently. "Too much," Jacob shouted. "Shut it off." "No," she cried. "Just a little longer." The elite units began to slow, just for a second. Their heads twitched, their movements staggered. One fell to its knees. Lyria dropped to the ground unconscious. Jacob caught her before she hit the snow. The jammer died. Silence. Then the rest of the hunters raised their weapons. Jacob gently laid Lyria against the wall of the cabin and picked up the EMP launcher. "Come on then," he muttered. "You want her? You go through me." The first plasma shot missed. Jacob fired the EMP round straight into the front line. The shockwave exploded. 3 hunters went down hard, sparks flying. The rest opened fire. Jacob dove behind a metal barrel. Blaster shot slicing through the air. One hit his shoulder, burning through the jacket. He winced but kept moving. From behind him, a voice, "I'm not done yet." Lyria stood, blood at the corner of her mouth, holding the backup jammer. "I can still jam their vision," she said. Jacob threw her his compad. "Then scramble them now." What happened next felt like chaos. Lyria sent a blind burst signal through the jammer. The hunters paused again. Just 2 seconds. Jacob used it. He charged, using the last drone like a shield. He crashed into the closest one, slammed it with the butt of his gun, then shot it through the neck. Oil sprayed. Another one leapt toward Lyria. She raised her hand and screamed. The glowing mark on her skin flared like lightning. The hunter stopped in midair, twitched, then exploded. Jacob stared. You did that?" "I took their control," she said, panting. "I sent it back to them." "You're more than a weapon," Jacob whispered. "I'm a storm," she said. One by one, they fought side by side. Jacob with old earth steel, Lyria with alien code and glowing hands. The snow burned. The trees caught fire. The cabin was torn in half. But in the end, only 2 were left standing, Jacob and Lyria. The rest were dead, or broken. Above them, the black ship flickered. "They're retreating," Lyria said. "They've lost signal control. They won't risk coming down now." Jacob dropped to his knees. "We survived." Lyria knelt beside him. "No, we won." He looked at her, face bloody, eyes wide, and for the first time she smiled fully. A real smile. A free smile. Smoke still rose from the trees. Fires glowed like dying stars all across the ruined clearing. Jacob stood in the middle of the battlefield, his shirt torn, face bruised, and arm bleeding. Around him were broken bodies, half machine, half alien hunters, now lifeless. Their glowing eyes were dark. Beside him stood Lyria, her breathing heavy, her silver skin streaked with ash and blood. The glowing mark on her side was still fading, like a machine slowly powering down. She held a cracked metal rod in one hand, her other hand resting lightly on Jacob's shoulder to steady herself. They were both hurt, but they were alive. The enemy ship above them had gone dark, silent, still, retreating into the sky. It left without a word, without a final shot. It had lost, and whoever was watching from above had finally understood. The girl they thought was a tool had found something stronger than programming. The cabin was gone, burned to the ground. Only a few metal sheets and a corner wall remained. Jacob led Lyria to what was left of the fireplace and helped her sit. "You saved us," Jacob said. Lyria looked at him, confused. "We saved us." Jacob gave her a tired smile. "Yeah. But if you hadn't done what you did, turning their own code back on them, we'd be dead." She didn't smile. Instead, she looked at the glowing lines on her skin. "They will come. Again. Not soon. But one day." Jacob sat beside her. "Then we'll be ready. Or maybe they'll be too scared to try again." Lyria's expression softened. "They fear what they can't control." "You're not controlled anymore," Jacob said. She looked at him. "That's because of you." They spent the next 2 days rebuilding what they could. The barn had survived with damage, but enough tools remained to start over. Jacob repaired the old water system, and Lyria helped rewire the solar panels using her strange knowledge of tech. They worked together quietly. Something had changed between them. Not just survival, not just trust. It was something deeper. Each time Jacob caught Lyria watching him, she didn't look away anymore. When he handed her tools, her fingers lingered on his. When they sat near the fire at night, she rested closer than before. He noticed but said nothing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Lyria walked up the path behind the cabin holding something in her hands, a small metal collar. It was burned and twisted, nearly unrecognizable. Jacob looked up. "Where did you find that?" "In the forest," she said. "It was mine once. They used it to shock me. It hurt. Every time I hesitated, every time I asked why." She placed it on the ground. Then she crushed it under her boot. The sound echoed. Jacob nodded. "Good. Let it stay buried." Lyria looked at him quiet for a long moment, then she whispered, "Jacob, if I wasn't who I am, if I wasn't made the way I was, would you still have helped me?" Jacob looked straight at her. "I didn't help you because of who you were. I helped you because I saw what they tried to hide." "What?" "That you're not broken," he said. "You're real." That night, snow fell again. They sat inside the half-rebuilt cabin wrapped in blankets near the new fire. Jacob had found an old music player in the barn and played a slow earth melody, soft, warm, full of memory. Lyria rested her head against the wall, her eyes closed, listening. "This sound," she said. "It feels like a dream." Jacob looked at her. "It's a love song." She opened her eyes. "Love?" "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "Strange, human idea. Painful sometimes, but powerful." She turned to face him. Does it mean you belong to someone? He nodded slowly. Sometimes. Sometimes it means they belong to each other. Lyria was quiet. Then she said, I want to belong, but not like before, not as property, not as a tool. She placed her hand gently over her chest. I want to choose. Jacob leaned closer. You already are choosing. She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing gently in the firelight. Then I choose this. She leaned in and pressed her forehead against his, a quiet sign of closeness. In her culture, Jacob closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he felt peace. Days turned to weeks. Word never came from above. No ships returned. No warnings. No beacons. It was like the galaxy had finally let go of her. Lyria started planting her first seeds in the garden behind the barn. Jacob watched her dig into the earth with care, smiling as her hands touched real dirt, not metal walls or glowing glass. She learned fast. She laughed more, sometimes clumsy, sometimes quiet, but always trying. Jacob built her a small room of her own beside the cabin, but most nights she stayed by the fire. With him. She loved the stars now. She didn't fear the sky anymore. Sometimes, they would sit outside under a blanket and look up, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her back. I used to think the stars were prisons, she whispered, each one a place I could never escape. Jacob smiled. Now, what do you think they are? She took his hand in hers. Now I think they're just lights. And this, she squeezed his hand, is home. One morning, Lyria walked to the stream where Jacob had first found her. She stood there quietly, remembering the cold, the fear, the feeling of being hunted. Then she took a deep breath and stepped into the water. She let it wash over her. She whispered, goodbye. Then she walked back up the path, clean, strong, free. A month later, a signal reached a small rebel outpost on the far side of the galaxy. A coded message. Simple, but clear. Subject 9 alive. Location secure. No longer property. No longer alone. The message ended with 2 words. Let her be. No one came after that. They had seen what she became, with him beside her, and they were afraid. Final scene. Lyria stood in the doorway of the rebuilt cabin, wearing a handmade jacket and scarf Jacob had sewn for her. She watched as he finished carving something into the wood above the door. When he stepped aside, she read the words aloud. Home. Jacob looked at her. Still want to stay? Lyria stepped forward, took his hand and said simply, I never want to leave.